criticisms of testing. Tests represent an invasion of privacy. So let's take a look at this. Well, let's take a look at this here. That tests may be an invasion of privacy when they are used without the permission of examinees to obtain personal or sensitive information. Now, an exception is the testing of students to measure commonly agreed upon academic objectives. The administration of attitude and personality measures probably or should require personal or parental permission. Right? Here, it has been reviewed that for many years the Canadian government obtained IQ tests of students at grade 3, grade 6, and grade 9, without the students realizing that they were given an IQ test. Right? All right, so test users should fully inform students and their parents of the purpose of testing, the nature of those test items, whether it's measuring IQ test or personalities, right? Or tasks and ways in which the information will be used. Now, when tests are used for selection, students should not be required to divulge personal information that is irrelevant to performance on the criterion measure. And also, tests used in research studies require a balance between the individual's right to privacy and society's need to obtain information. Right? So here is what consent must be sought. Tests create anxiety and interfere with learning. Right? Now, one study asked college students the effect of weekly quizzes on their attitudes and achievement. Now, 80% of those responses given said, the quizzes helped them to learn no more. While 20% reported saying the quizzes helped them no more than usual. So majority of them conceded to the fact that the quizzes did help them. Okay. What about did those quizzes create anxiety? Well, only 2% said yes. Okay. But then out of these for these 2% respondents who said yes, 87% of them believe that the tests produce anxiety are helpful because it made learning easier. Now, a very famous psychologist, Berline, his research informed us that most people we need an optimal level of arousal or optimal level of anxiety in order for us to have maximum performance. And it is true, okay? It is true. Ask those Olympians, Olympic athletes, yes, a fair amount of anxiety propel them to maximum performance. that type of thing. So it may not be this bad as people believe. Okay? All right. Now, there's a national survey of more than 1,000 parents of high school age children. Gotta take a look. Most parents believe that the use of standardized tests was an objective way to match students with the universities they attend, and that they were much fairer than many teachers' grades. You will see later on that there are a lot of complaints against complaint leveled at teachers. All right. Another study, quite early on, back in 1977, but then has been recently supported by a lot of studies. Okay? Well, this 1977 study, supported by a lot of very recent studies, as recent as 2024, reported that administrators and teachers stated that they were strongly supportive of standardized achievement tests. They also believed students, although perhaps slightly anxious about these tests, they were non-antagonistic to it. Okay, so it is kind of a general consensus. Okay, that standardized tests are put to good uses. All right. Also, one researcher, Kirkland, early on, he reported the following, and all these reports have been recently supported by a lot of studies. Mild degree of anxiety usually facilitate learning. This is true. Optimal level of arousal. Now, whereas high anxiety level hinder learning in most instances. This is true. Okay. Now, another one here. The less able students incur a higher level of test anxiety than does the more capable ones. And also all those who are well prepared, they harbor less anxiety than those who are not that well prepared. Okay. The third finding, being familiar with the type of test to be administered reduces test anxiety. So it is true. Okay? The first time you try something, the first time you take a test, the first time you do something, it's always anxiety inducing. Is that right? The more familiar students are with the test format, timing of the test, and so on, the less anxiety. Is that right? All right. Highly anxious students, another finding, highly anxious students do better than less anxious ones on tests measuring rote recall, rote memorization. They perform less well, however, on tests requiring flexibility in thought. Okay. The next finding, test anxiety increases with grade level. A little bit. Finally, although there appears to be no relationship between sex and anxiety among elementary children, junior high school girls indicate that they experience more anxiety than the boys at comparable grade level. But then we should also know that now, as of 2024, as of 2024, we know that more boys dropped out of high school far more than girls. And that was university students. Yeah, 2 decades ago, there used to be more male students than female students, especially in graduate studies. It is now, as of 2024, and then was, say, 2014, the past 10 years, it's just the reverse. Far more female students in, say, in third year university, fourth year university, and then a lot more female students in graduate studies, especially in social sciences. Okay, all right. Now, in most studies relating anxiety testing, the procedure has been to identify students who admit they are anxious during exams and to compare the performance with those who report low degrees of anxiety. Well, none of these studies provide data on the extent to which the test itself creates anxiety among individuals who are not generally anxious. So this is rather a personality trait. Whether someone is suffering from anxiety or not when during test. And finally, students should be motivated to prepare for and to take tests without creating needless anxiety. It can be taught if they prepare the test well, and then they should be able to overcome this. Tests permanently categorize students. Well, now, in the battle times, IQ test did justice for many years. It was only I think it was only until the 2000. Okay, and a little after 2000, the situation becomes better. Okay, now the belief that measurements are infallible and that performance cannot be modified has had serious consequences. Some students are permanently categorized, and teachers tend to use these classifications relentlessly. Okay? Now, let's say is it true that if a student was branded as, let's say, quote unquote, a slow learner at grade 2, the same student will be classified as a slow learner in grade 3, in grade 4. That type of thing. I think we discussed this in IQ testing. IQ testing. All right. We must know that any single observation of an individual's performance represents only limited information that may vary as circumstances change. Only by continuous evaluation can teachers amass sufficient data to allow them to draw reasonable conclusions about typical performance. So again, it is the misuse of examinations, okay, rather than the tests themselves that should be criticized. And not all teachers misuse test results. This is something we can do. It's something we can do. That is to say, nowadays here, with all the information we have, all the studies we have done in IQ testing, we begin to turn around this. Okay, all right? And we begin to provide positive descriptions to less, to say lower IQ students, we accentuate what they can do, not to emphasize what they cannot do or they are unable to do. We accentuate the positives. All right. Here, test penalize bright and creative students. Well, is that true? Sometimes. Okay. Let me give you this example. Okay. Is the following statement grammatically correct? Those of you in English study. Okay. Anyway, among them, Tom and Dick were not able to find enough money. Now, take a look at this. The English grammar. Is that correct? Among them, Tom and Dick were not able to find enough money. All right. If okay, Tom and Dick, among them are also your David, Mary, Maria, Linda, Peter, whatever. Okay, a lot of people here. Then, this statement, among them, Tom and Dick were not able to find enough money. Then, but grammatically, this is correct. Because when you use the word among, it has to be more than two people. Okay? It has to be between two people. If what? Here, if only Tom and Dick are referred to, then among is wrong. It should be between. Among one. All right? So when you refer to among one, more than two people, two things, two items, then what? Among, then you use among. But then when you have only two persons, two items, two books, whatever, you have to use between two. All right? Okay. Now, it must be admitted that vague and ambiguous items sometimes do appear on tests, and nothing is gained by trying to justify their inclusion. But to claim that all or even many items discriminate against the bright or creative student cannot be justified either. Okay? Now, but no test is perfect. We know that. Okay? Let me tell you a story given by Joycelyn Barnwell, published in 1982 and in 1998. A black parent described how a teacher-made test penalized her son. Okay, he is Joycelyn Barnwell. All right, so I will read that to you. My son, John, took a test in phonics. He was asked the first letter in the words named by the pictures. John had been fishing since he was 3 years old. He saw a picture of a fish and he put a T. The teacher said it was wrong. John said, What do you mean it's wrong? That's a trout. The teacher said, but this is a fish. And John said, okay, lady, if you wanted an F sound, you should have put a flounder in your picture. Okay, that's the end of what Jocelyn Barnwell was writing. Okay, you see the number of serious errors committed by publishers is relatively small, and when they do occur, the press is quick to report them. All right, but then here what that test penalize bright and creative students. It does happen, but not often at all. Okay, not often at all. All right, you know what is what here? Tests are biased against minority students. By minority, I put down here such as the blacks, Hispanics, native one, indigenous. At that time they called it native peoples. Now we call them indigenous peoples. Okay, what kind of bias? Okay, socio-economic bias, content bias. Now, socio-economic bias. What are those here? Well, let's take a look here. One of the most persistent and serious allegations against tests is that they discriminate against minorities such as blacks, Hispanics, and Native indigenous Americans. Most of the controversy regarding test bias has involved the unfair use of intelligence tests, and this is true. As you must have learned that what Robert Williams, the Bitch test indicated that this is true. I remember Bitch 100, and the use of intelligence test in school and in industry as well. Okay? Now, one can identify at least 5 definitions of test bias. According to this definition, a test is biased against minorities and in favor of whites if it fails to eliminate realistic socio-economic differences. Well, in general, we know that in general, as reports surfacing now in 2024, those reports, they are rooting for the reinstatement of standardized tests in the United States. And I think Canada will follow very soon. Okay? So, the test is biased against minorities in favor of the majority white if it fails to eliminate realistic socioeconomic differences. In general, non-whites are poorer. Okay, they are poorer. They live in environment not so nice. Okay, to put it this way here. And secondly, if it uses differences in average score between groups, so that is to say, the mean for white is always larger than mean for minority. This is true in all North America. In North America and also in Europe. Okay? So it is a general, this one is the general observation. And then bias when it contains content that facilitates the performance of whites while reducing the performance of minorities. Okay? Let's say I will talk a little bit more about this later on. Okay? Let's say if you The test item consists of what things you could find in a cruise ship. So well-to-do students are likely to understand what is it, but then what poor students who have never been to a cruise, they would have no idea what that is. Is that right? Here, what it has been different score, different success rates between groups, right? Different success rate between groups, right? And when the test score leads to different social consequences between groups, between white and non-white, right? All right, so let's well a little bit more into socio-economic bias. All right, now the psychology of the disadvantaged child is what permeated with the concern for obtaining the basic necessities of life, like food, clothing, shelter, although there is a wide range of individual differences among the disadvantaged that one might expect in any group. All right, so remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That is what deficiency needs, is that right? The deficiency needs that the poor students are lacking, okay? And they are what they want to fulfill those needs, okay? So to the extent that education fails to provide these necessities, it is seen as useless and irrelevant and a force to be neutralized in the fight for survival. Is that right? But to say that why here many children from disadvantaged homes are not as highly motivated by the promise of future benefits from attending school and doing one's best as our middle class and upper class students. These disadvantaged students tend to put forth their best efforts when an immediate gain can be realized. Furthermore, they are more concerned with pleasing their peers than their parents or teachers. Right? Their need for immediate reinforcement and their particularly strong peer group attachments must be understood if the relationship between test performance and socioeconomic status is to be interpreted properly. All right. So you see here, based on Maslow's theory, that all these poor kids, they tend to find ways to fulfill their basic needs, okay, before they will be inspired to attain educational objective. All right, and this is true, okay, of all societies. All right, now in contrast, many middle or upper class children strive to do their best on tests because they are convinced with good reason that doing well now will have important repercussions for them later. And also, they generally want to please the parents and teachers by doing well. And test results reinforce their need to achieve. So the difference in motivation is one explanation of the differential test performance of disadvantaged and advantaged students. So this is the kind of socioeconomic biases. Okay. Now, here one observation is that socioeconomically disadvantaged children often work very rapidly through a test, making responses more or less at random. Apparently, they are convinced in advance that they cannot do well on the test. And they find that by getting through the test rapidly, they can shorten the period of discomfort which it produces. It is so sad that it is so sad. All right. Now, while we are talking about that here, there does seem to be rather widespread misuse of tests that has had serious negative effects on minority children. Not just testing per se. Okay. Several researchers have found that many Hispanic students in the United States, okay, they were placed in classes for the mentally retarded many years ago, back in the 70s, solely on the basis of test scores and without regard to the child's medical, ethnic, linguistic, and social background. And the researcher also found that when socioeconomic conditions were held constant, say, using you could hold some variable constant using statistical method like analysis of covariance. When they hold constant those socioeconomic differences in those socioeconomic conditions, then they found that once you hold constant those socioeconomic variables, then the IQ score between Anglos and Hispanics were negligible in the researchers' language. And so you see here, it is important for us to know that and also recently acknowledged by the college entrance exam board in the United States by Harvard, the researchers, that this thing here, socioeconomic biases, they do occur, and we have to pay attention to this. Content bias, okay, content bias. Sometimes test items contain unfavorable stereotypes that can be identified by asking individuals or groups to make such judgment. Okay, the overuse of masculine or feminine nouns and pronouns, physical characteristics like skin color, hair length, and items that imply racial role stereotype. Say at that time, the test item, say Indian warrior, white physician, black bellboys, an Asian laundry worker, that type of thing. Okay? They want all these references to only white authors, is that right? So here, the white authors of test, they tend to use this type of thing. Okay, they have all these have all been identified as the perpetuation of at least potentially undesirable stereotype. The usual rule is to make sure that there are as many references to females as males, black and white professionals and non-professional, and so on. Wow. So let's take a look at say here, the content bias in terms of gender. Okay. Back then, before 1987, researchers have found that 90 majority of the textbook, say 95% of the textbook, they found that the main, I say fiction, for example, they continue all these fiction, they portray the main character as male, and female characters, male characters as male. I'm sorry, the main character as male, strong, able, and confident. Female characters as weak, weak, indecisive, and ready to be rescued. Okay, and school textbook, they found that there was significantly more male names, male pronouns like he, far more than female names, and far more than female pronouns like she or her. Okay, so the he, his, far more than she or her. So a consortium of women researchers, they petitioned that this should be changed. So a little later on, back in the early 90s, then publishers, they began to advise authors that we look forward to a balance of female names and male names, female pronouns and male pronouns. Okay? So then back in the late 90s, a textbook must have the gender balanced gender names. Okay? He, she is about 50-50, he's about 50-50. Otherwise, the publishers won't publish the book. Okay? If you take a look at recent take a look at any any educational psychology textbook, you will find that equal reference to female names and male names. So a lot of time in educational psychology, teachers, they use a she or her. Okay? Now, before 1987, you will see that teachers are referred to as a he or his. His way of teaching. All right? So you see here, we have made progress in terms of in terms of content. All right? This kind of content. Number 6, test measure only limited and superficial aspect of behavior. Is that right? Well, the claim that test measure, the test measure kind of here is all this limited detailed superficial content can easily be challenged by examining the content of standardized achievement tests. Most of these tests reflect the content found in textbooks, curriculum guides, state legislative requirements, and opinions by teachers and subject matter specialists. If the test measures facts rather than higher level thinking processes, it is because most curricula emphasize facts. It is the curriculum that determines test content and not test content that determines curriculum. Nonetheless, even a cursory examination of standardized test content would demonstrate that most tests have at least half of their items measuring more complex thought processes than mere what recall, mere what memorization, rote memory. Okay. Contrast this with most teacher-made exams, where only 10 to 20% of the items measure more complex goals. Okay, so it can be empirically demonstrated that tests provide more accurate and complete information than do what impressionist or impressionistic or subjective evaluation. Right? So the last sentence I quote from John Sachs, SAX, 1989. All right, so that's the one. The criticism directed at testing. And what I want to remind you that what even though a lot of what educators voiced the concern what they are what against standardized testing, recent what studies chief among those from Harvard indicated that standardized testing results can be put to good use and they can predict, and they are very useful. Okay? And what they also kind of what because what using test scores to admit students to Ivy League University can allow those poor students to break through the barrier constrained by the environment. Okay, that what now you understand that what it was because of testing. Okay, many years ago, okay, so many centuries ago, that allowed the poor peasant to have higher education, not just the well-to-do, okay, not just the well-to-do. Even poor peasant could do that because of if you have high test score, you could enter into higher education. So this is good use of test score. All right, good. Thank you.